if you're picturing a sprawling $12 billion mega mansion when you think of the world's richest man's home, you're picturing the wrong billionaire entirely. The real story of where Elon Musk lives is stranger, and in its own way far more logic-defying, than any imagined palace could ever be. Musk, a man whose net worth has been estimated as high as $800 billion, driven largely by the soaring valuations of SpaceX and Tesla, spends most of his nights not in a marble-floored estate with a private movie theater and a dozen guest wings, but in a roughly 400-square-foot prefabricated box, a few hundred feet from a rocket launch pad in South Texas. The house reportedly cost about $50,000. That's not a typo, and it's not a metaphor. It is, by almost any measure, one of the strangest housing decisions in the history of extreme wealth. And understanding how Musk ended up there tells you more about the man than any billion-dollar mansion ever could. From Bel Air royalty to I will own no house. To appreciate just how unusual Musk's current living situation is, it helps to understand what he walked away from. Through the 2010s, Musk assembled a real estate portfolio in Los Angeles that looked exactly like what you'd expect from a billionaire tech founder. His primary residence was a roughly 20,000-square-foot Bel Air mansion, purchased in 2012 for around $17 million, complete with 7 bedrooms, 11 bathrooms, a tennis court, a fruit orchard, and a 5-car garage. Over the following years, he added several more properties in the same exclusive neighborhood, reportedly to prevent new neighbors from building anything that might obstruct his views, along with a historic Gene Wilder-owned estate. Nearby, at his real estate peak, Musk's California holdings spread across Bel Air and a 47-acre Mediterranean-style estate in Hillsborough near Silicon Valley. Complete with a ballroom, a leather-walled library, and its own reservoir, were worth well over $100 million combined. Then, on May 1, 2020, Musk did something almost no billionaire in history had done before. He announced, in a single tweet, that he intended to sell nearly everything. "I am selling almost all physical possessions," he wrote, "will own no house." When a follower asked why, Musk offered a one-word explanation: freedom. Within weeks, he had listed several of his Bel Air properties, and by 2021 he had sold his entire California portfolio, including the Hillsborough estate, which fetched $40.8 million, and his original Bel Air mansion, which sold for just under $30 million. In total, Musk's real estate liquidation brought in a reported profit of roughly $25 million on properties that had cost him a fraction of that to acquire. The $50,000 house next to a rocket pad, what Musk moved into instead, has become one of the more talked-about footnotes in modern billionaire culture. A boxable casita, a prefabricated, foldable tiny home manufactured by a Nevada-based housing startup, installed on land near SpaceX's Starbase facility on the Boca Chica Peninsula in South Texas. The unit measures somewhere between 375 and 400 square feet, roughly the size of a 2-car garage, and starts at a base price in the range of $50,000, though Musk reportedly rents, rather than owns his particular unit, with SpaceX itself holding the underlying property. Photos that have surfaced of the home's interior show none of the trappings typically associated with billionaire living. A simple wooden desk, stacks of books, a model rocket, a foldable Murphy bed that tucks away during the day to free up floor space, and a compact kitchen, with a full-size refrigerator, oven, and dishwasher, squeezed efficiently into the small footprint. The home features high-performance insulation and windows, designed to meet Energy Star standards, a design ethos that fits neatly with the sustainability messaging Musk has built much of his business career around. Some reports suggest he converted what would have been a second bedroom into additional workspace, since the home functions as much as an office, as a place to sleep during the intense, around-the-clock demands of Starship development. The location itself is entirely strategic. Boca Chica sits just steps from Starbase, the facility where SpaceX develops and launches its Starship rockets, the vehicle central to Musk's long-term ambitions of making humanity a multi-planetary species. Rather than commuting from a distant luxury estate, Musk can reportedly walk to the launch site within minutes, minimizing the travel time that would otherwise eat into a schedule already stretched between multiple companies operating on opposite sides of the country. the return of a family compound. It's worth noting that Musk's minimalism has never been quite as absolute as the "I will own no house" tweet suggested. In 2022, court records revealed that Musk had quietly purchased a roughly 700 square foot home in Westlake Hills, near Austin, Texas. A detail that surprised observers given his public vow, just 2 years earlier. Shortly after moving in, he installed a 16-foot, chain-link security fence around the property, a move that drew complaints from neighbors and reportedly violated several city ordinances since it was built without the proper permits. That Austin footprint expanded considerably further in 2024, when the New York Times reported that Musk had spent roughly $35 million assembling what amounted to a family compound. A 14,400 square foot Tuscan-style villa, a 6-bedroom mansion on Lake Austin, and a third residence a short walk away, reportedly designed to keep his growing number of children and several of their mothers within close proximity of one another. Musk has publicly denied building a secret compound, though property records and investors' reporting suggest he controls multiple nearby properties through private holding entities. A common practice among high-net-worth individuals seeking additional privacy and security. Reports indicate Neuralink executive Siobhan Zilis, one of the mothers of several of Musk's children, lives in part of this Austin compound with their children, while Musk himself splits his time between Texas's properties, Tropert, and the Boca Chica tiny home, depending on where his work demands him to be. Musk's family situation has become almost as widely discussed as his real estate choices. As of 2026, he has fathered 14 children with 4 different women. 6 children with his first wife, Justine Wilson, including a set of twins and a set of triplets, following the tragic loss of their first child to sudden infant death syndrome in 2002. 3 children with musician Grimes. 4 children with Siobhan Zilis, including twins, and 2 additional children born in 2024 and 2025. And 1 child with social media influencer Ashley St. Clair, whose custody Musk reportedly moved to contest in early 2026, following a public falling out. The boxable phenomenon. Musk's endorsement, even an informal one, has had a measurable ripple effect on the company behind his tiny home. Boxable, the Nevada-based startup that manufactures the casita model Musk lives in, has seen waitlists for its units swell past 170,000 people in the years since word first spread about the world's richest man choosing one as his primary residence. The company markets the casita as a rapid assembly, foldable housing unit that can be transported to a site and set up in a fraction of the time required for traditional construction, with base prices ranging from roughly $49,500 to $60,000, before accounting for land, foundation work, utility hookups, delivery and installation. Musk has no known ownership stake in the company, though his high-profile use of the product has functioned as an extraordinarily effective, if unofficial, advertisement, legitimizing the tiny home concept for a much broader audience than the movement had previously reached. That broader cultural impact is arguably where Musk's housing story has had its most lasting effect. Long before he moved to Boca Chica, tiny homes were largely associated with budget-conscious minimalists, off-grid enthusiasts, or people looking to escape traditional mortgage debt. Not with the wealthiest individuals on the planet. Musk's decision effectively flipped that association on its head, turning a downsized, function-first space into something that could be read as a status symbol of a totally different kind. Not the status of having more, but the status of supposedly needing less. Design and business commentators have spent considerable time debating whether that shift reflects a genuine change in how extreme wealth chooses to present itself publicly, or simply one billionaire's uniquely effective, personal branding exercise, dressed up in the language of minimalism and sustainability. Why, this actually defies logic. There's a reason Musk's housing situation generates so much more genuine fascination than any conventional celebrity mega mansion ever could. It inverts the basic logic that's supposed to govern extreme wealth. Traditionally, net worth and home size move in the same direction. The richer someone gets, the larger and more elaborate their primary residence tends to become. Musk broke that pattern entirely, downsizing dramatically at almost the exact moment his fortune began its most explosive growth. He sold his last major property in December 2021, worth roughly $30 million, and moved full-time into the tiny Boca Chica home during the very years his net worth surged from the tens of billions into the hundreds of billions, eventually crossing $700 billion by late 2025 and pushing past $800 billion by some estimates in 2026, driven by an enormous SpaceX valuation following its merger with his AI company, xAI. Musk himself has offered a fairly consistent explanation for the contradiction whenever he's addressed it publicly, that his net worth isn't cash sitting in a bank account waiting to be spent on real estate, but almost entirely tied up in ownership stakes in the companies he's built, and that physical possessions, in his view, simply weigh a person down and slow them down. Whether that explanation reflects genuine personal philosophy, savvy personal branding, or some combination of both, remains a matter of ongoing public debate, but the practical effect has been the same either way. Musk has, quite deliberately, made himself into a walking contradiction of what extreme wealth is supposed to look like. A story still being written. Musk's real estate story hasn't fully settled, and there have been persistent rumors in recent months of a potential return to more traditional luxury, including unconfirmed reports of interest in an enormous, roughly $300 million property in Miami Beach. Whether that speculation ever materializes into an actual purchase remains to be seen, and given Musk's history of abrupt, headline-grabbing reversals on nearly every front of his personal life, it wouldn't be entirely out of character. What's clear, for now, is that the world's richest man spends most of his nights within walking distance of a rocket launch pad, in a home smaller than many suburban garages, furnished with a fold-down bed, a model rocket, and a stack of books, rather than anything resembling the marble staircases and infinity pools, typically associated with a fortune of his size. It's a housing choice that has nothing to do with a $12 billion mansion, and everything to do with a much stranger, much more genuinely surprising story. A man worth more than most countries' entire economies, choosing, at least for now, to live in something smaller than a hotel room. What the numbers actually say it's worth, putting Musk's fortune into perspective, to appreciate just how wide the gap has grown between his wealth and his housing choices. Forbes and Bloomberg estimates placed his net worth above $700 billion by late 2025, and various reports since have suggested figures approaching or exceeding $800 billion, driven overwhelmingly by his ownership stakes in SpaceX, following the company's roughly $800 billion valuation, and its subsequent merger with xAI, which pushed the combined entity's valuation past $1.2 trillion. Tesla, despite periods of stock volatility, has remained the other major pillar of his fortune. Musk himself has repeatedly pointed out that this wealth is almost entirely theoretical, in the sense that matters for everyday spending. It exists as equity in companies, rather than liquid cash, meaning that even if he wanted to fund an elaborate real estate portfolio purely from pocket change, doing so would require selling off stakes in the very companies that generated the wealth in the first place, a move that could itself send shockwaves through those companies' stock prices. That distinction helps explain, at least in part, why a man capable of buying almost any property on Earth outright continues to rent a $50,000 prefabricated box instead. It isn't that he couldn't afford a $12 billion mansion, several times over if he wished. It's that the entire premise of separating his identity from conventional displays of material wealth has become, whether by genuine conviction or calculated design, one of the most consistent and recognizable threads running through his public persona for more than 5 years now. In a world where extreme wealth is almost always measured by square footage, marble countertops, and private docks, Musk has built an entirely different kind of legend for himself. The richest man alive, living in a box barely larger than a shipping container, a few hundred feet from the rockets he hopes will one day carry humanity to Mars. Proving that when it comes to Elon Musk, the most logical assumption about how a person of his wealth would choose to live is usually the safest to bet against.